Bonjour mes amis, et bienvenue au Pendu dans la Lune. Hello friends, if this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you probably guessed from that introduction that I just gave that this is my series in which I use Tarot de Marseille or antique Italian decks to help me explore a topic that I have drawn from my larger weekly Rider-Waite-Smith based tarot spread, which I have already done. The tarot spread of this week was a very in-depth look at the ideas of balance and also receptivity. And in fact, that's what I called the video for this week, was balance and receptivity. So if you'd like to check out that video, I will put a card up here for you to click on and hop on over to this week's larger Rider-Waite-Smith based tarot spread. And all of my spreads are basically jumping off or leaping from this primary question, which is, how do we live our lives more intentionally? How do we live the intentional life for this week in particular? And then from that larger Rider-Waite-Smith based spread, I pull a question. And I dive into that question in this series. And the question that I pulled from this week's spread was from the oracle portion of the spread. Now, in my larger spread, what I have in the center is a spread of oracle cards. And then around those oracle cards, I have cards which are called inquiry cards, cards with questions on them. And each one of those questions is answered by one tarot card from two different decks. That's generally how I do my big spread. And I usually draw the question for this series from the tarot cards. But this week, I pulled it from the oracle cards. Because I believe the idea of receptivity is a very important one. And I wanted to dive into that a little bit farther. So, the question I pulled for this week was, what will opening to the receptive mind allow us to understand about living life intentionally? Let me say that once more. It's a little long, right? What will opening to the receptive mind allow us to understand about living life intentionally? Now, you might be asking, what is the receptive mind? What does that mean? Well, usually when we think of the egoic mind or the conscious mind, we think of mostly a mind that is out searching its environment, looking for danger, looking for things it wants, analyzing things, breaking things apart, categorizing things, and it's out in the world gathering information and then manipulating that information in one way or the other. It could be filtering the information, it could be twisting and torquing the information out of true alignment, or it could be doing a number of other things. The receptive mind could in one way be seen perhaps as the intuitive mind. Our intuition generally works in the pre-conscious. I will say pre-conscious rather than subconscious, because we are conscious of the results of our intuition. And when I speak of intuition, I'm thinking of the Jungian version of intuition, which is a thought process, which is a pair to, thinking, feeling, which is a pair to sensing. Yeah, the sensing mind is one that feels things and looks at things in the environment and receives sensory information. The intuitive mind is one which has received information and analyzes it holistically. What does that mean? Rather than breaking it apart and putting it back together and trying to measure things or balance things or put things in relation to other things, it's the mind that perceives wholeness. without breaking it apart, but sees patterns, sees plans, sees breadth rather than specifics. So for example, if you think of looking at a map, look at a map, you say you want to get from here to here. This is the way I think of explaining the intuitive mind. The rational mind, or the logical mind, would say, okay, I want to get from here to here, so I will go this way, and I need to keep going this way. So there's a road that goes here, and then let's see, that's still in the right direction. And so I'll keep going down this road. This looks like it's going to keep going in the right direction. And yeah, it analyzes the path. And well, is this going to be the most direct route? Is it going to be the best speed? What is traffic going to be like? The intuitive mind, on the other hand, sees the whole map, knows we're going from here to here, and boom, the route appears without having to piece it together. It just appears because we see the entire pattern, and the most clear route reveals itself to us. Not magically, but because we can just see it. We are thinking holistically. Does that make sense? So when I'm speaking of the intuitive mind, that's the kind of thought process that I'm referring to. And that's more of a pre-conscious thought process. Now, below that intuitive mind, below is just a term of convenience, but at a different level of our conscious is the unconscious, which has things like in Jungian terms, archetypes. It has the shadow self. It has the anima for a man, or an animus for a woman. Yeah, it houses our other side of the spectrum gender, from whatever we tend to identify with. And I'm not really sure what Jung would say about those of us who identify in the center, whether there would be both anima and animus in the unconscious, or it would develop differently. Haven't seen studies about that yet. But so there are those things, and then there's the self, in the big S kind of self, the self archetype, the archetype of the wholeness of self, which is unreachable, according to Jungian psychology. Fully unreachable, because it would be so powerful and so immense that it would overwhelm us. And so there's a lot going on down there. And so the receptive mind is a mind that is receptive to information that we already have, to wisdom that we already have, and has been percolating and has been stewing and marinating and fermenting within the unconscious mind, and also within the superconscious mind, with the eternalness that we are, and only, I don't want to say fractionally, is experiencing the world, because it's the eternal nature that we are is fully here, is fully present. And when we think of the eternal nature that we are, there's no size, there's no comparison between the physical, where we have shape and we have size, and the non-physical, where there's none of that. So am I going to say the eternal nature, which has no size or shape, is larger than us? That makes no sense. But so there is the eternal nature that we are, that we can also be receptive to information from. So that's what I'm referring to or thinking about when I mention the receptive mind. So again, what will opening to the receptive mind allow us to understand about living life intentionally? So friends, I've pulled some cards, and I'll show you the question and the tarot's response to that question. If you're curious about those cards, they're beautiful cards, aren't they? They are made by Artisan Tarot, a still, I think, fairly new team of creators who are redrawing and more than restoring, but recreating older tarot decks. Up until now, they've all been Tarot de Marseille, but I believe they're also venturing out into other projects as well. But primarily, older French and Tarot de Marseille styled decks. And this is the redrawing of the Nicolas Conver deck, the most commonly redrawn, reproduced, facsimiled decks that I know of. And my version came in this beautiful rosewood box. Now, unfortunately, the rosewood box is no longer available. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I'm so happy that I have it. I'm sorry it's not available, but the deck is available. So I will have a link in the description box below so that you can go and check out this deck and their other decks and perhaps pick up one or all of them. They've got 3 out right now. They've got the Conver, they've got the Noblet, and they've got the Dodal. Beautiful decks, lovely decks. But this is the Conver deck, the Nicolas Conver deck. And so, the question, what will opening up to the receptive mind allow us to understand about living intentionally? And you saw the lineup of the cards was the Valet d'Épée, the Page of Swords. So that was an interesting start, right? We start off answering the question about mind with the suit of the mind, Valet d'Épée. And then we had the 3 of Wands, and then we had the Fool card, Le Mat. Yeah? And you also notice, I believe, that the 2 people cards, the Valet and the Fool, Le Mat, were facing in opposite directions. The body of the Fool was kind of pointed towards the Wands, which pointed towards the Wands, and by extension to the Fool, which also pointed off to the right if you were facing them. But the head of the Valet was looking to the left. This can be important for us when we're reading these cards. So I am going to start with the Valet. I'm going to move from the Valet to the 3 of Wands to the Fool, because that seems like at least the bodies seem to be pointed in that direction, though the first head was turned in the other. So, the Valet d'Épée, the Page of Swords. What does that mean? Well, it's a card of curiosity. It's a card of mental energy, but youthful, vibrant mental energy. It's the newbie. It's the eternal beginner mind, right? It's a need. We have the need to hone or to sharpen our intellects, of course. We know that a newbie, the one who is new to learning something, requires some mental exercises and needs to, again, hone the intellect in whatever field they are a beginner at. That makes sense, right? But even those of us who have been studying and want to keep beginner mind know that we are constantly, hopefully eternally, sharpening and honing the mind. It's the card of sometimes hesitation due to inexperience. Yeah? Do you remember when you first started learning something? Are you one of those people who just dove in without looking back, without any second thoughts, without wondering, am I really up to this challenge? Or are you the kind of person who, like me, who gets started and then thinks, okay, am I really learning this correctly? Am I understanding this correctly? Is what's going on here right, or am I confused? Especially at the beginning. This is a card of accepting that, I believe. Accepting that we might not be entirely sure about what we are learning or the direction we are going as we pursue honing our minds. There might be a little bit of hesitation or insecurity, unsureness. It's also the card of the student or seeker, again, who lacks a little bit of self-confidence, which is natural for someone who is just beginning to learn. Remember when you were learning to walk? If you do, you're impressive. But you see babies learning to walk. They're not entirely self-confident in what they're doing. And we may not have completed our education, but that is a wonderful thing to recognize. When living the intentional life, if we ever felt like, I've got it, I've learned all there is to learn, I know all there is that I want to know, and I'm good now. That's like saying, okay, time to die. And I don't just mean like leave this body and go into the next body and start a new life. I'm talking about, okay, time to zap myself out of non-physical existence because there's nothing else left to learn. That's an impossibility. Recognizing that we are now and always the valet de paix, I think is a wonderful thing and allows us to be that receptive mind. Rather than the Knight of Swords, who is out there, who's charging out there to get information or to say what he or she knows, or they know. The valet is open to learning. Is the most receptive of the courts. So, what will opening to the receptive mind allow me to do? It will allow me to recognize that I am, in essence, an eternal beginner's mind. And my curiosity is what feeds my mental energy. And it's that mental energy which makes living in these physical bodies interesting, fascinating, wonderful. Our emotions make it wonderful in a different way. Yeah? The stuff that we do makes it different. It makes it interesting and wonderful in a different way. The creation, the passion that we have. And our passion can feed our thoughts, right? And that's exactly where we're going to right now. Yeah? Our curiosity, our mental energy, what's going on here? And I recognize that I might not be entirely secure. I might not be entirely self-confident in what I'm learning right now. And that's cool. I'm good with that. Because that's an indication that I am open and receptive to whatever there is to know. And so I move into the Three of Wands. The Three of Wands can be acting impulsively. But I think there are different ways of understanding that phrase, acting impulsively. There's you're being so impulsive. Settle down, get a grip, stop being so impulsive. Follow the rules, follow your routine. There's that, but there's another way. The impulse to act. Acting on our impulses. I have an impulse that I want to do this, and then I act on that. Not because I lack restraint, but because I feel the impulse and I know that that impulse is correct and I will act on it, rather than sometimes we get the impulse and we say, no, I don't know. I act on the impulse. Living spontaneously. Not living a disorganized life, living without any direction, but allowing spontaneity to also feed our life fire. Yeah, that this three, we've gone from the one, the first, the burst of a passion or the burst of a sexual motivation or the burst of something creative. And it splits into the two, which gives us a binary pair of things that join to create this third thing, which is actual movement, right? Movement out. So acting on those impulses, living with those impulses, release from self, and freedom, the freedom to act. It's a burst of energy, right? It's that first real, I mean, there's the burst in the one, yes, but then this is a real burst of energy. Something more formidable than the one. That it's still like a seed that needs to sprout. This has sprouted. Energy gushes forth and feeds the fires of our passions and our curiosity and our creativity, and it feeds the page, the page of swords as well. That energy can feed the mind. Again, not to go out there like the knight, but to sustain beginner mind. Because beginner mind takes some energy to sustain. Have you noticed that? It's not just a passive receptivity, it's an active receptivity. I am open. Not, I'm open. Okay, whatever comes, comes. But I am open. And that requires fire of some kind. And there's the fire in the three. Spontaneous, creative, vigor, exuberance to get started. These are all things that come with the Three of Wands. And then we move into Le Mat, the Fool, which is again beginner mind, right? I mean, the Fool is the numberless card. I'm not going to say he's the beginning. I'm not going to say that she's the end. I'm not going to say that they are anywhere in particular in the order of the trumps. They're the numberless card. And the Fool is freedom. It's wandering. It's searching. The Fool has energy. The Fool is on a quest. The Fool is on a pilgrimage and is liberated from whatever might have weighted them down, or from whatever closedness might have happened at the end of the previous journey. The Fool is free to move in any direction they want. It's able to evolve too, right? Because we're at the new beginning. We're at a new beginning. We're at the beginning of a new evolution. And we've given up control. And we've let loose of the reins of the chariot. We've let loose of needing to know it all in the sun. We've let loose of even the call from the judgment card. We've let loose and we're free to move. And as we're free to move, our attention is right here and right now. Not to some tower moment that we're afraid is going to come, or some success that we are hoping we're moving in the direction of. We are right here, we're right now. That's the Fool. And looks foolish from normal societal standards, right? Well, what are your plans? Where are you going? What's your next job? How much money are you making? When are you going to get married? The Fool is free of all that. Not that the Fool is not going to do any of that, but that language, the Fool is free of that language and free to be open to receive. So, what did we have? Again, we started with the valet. The valet, curiosity, mental energy, unsure about themselves because we are the eternal newbie, and we're fed from our passion, the burning Three of Wands. And then we realize that we are open, we have the energy to receive as we move on the powerful, powerful current of intention, like the Fool, moves with the power of intention in freedom, attentive to right here and right now. but quintessentially open. So how does opening to the receptive mind allow us to, what does it allow us to understand about living the intentional life? It allows us to understand that opening the receptive mind is the intentional life. The open receptive mind is the intentional life. It is the life of the eternal fool. Does that make sense? Now, I mentioned just a moment ago that the valet de épée was looking off to one side, and also we see that the fool is moving off to the other side. They're both looking, and one is definitely moving outside of the spread. And sometimes when that happens, one thing that we can do as readers of Tarot de Marseille, and also other systems, but as readers of Tarot de Marseille, is we can draw an extra card to see what is the valet looking at? Where is the fool moving? And I did that. Let me show you the two cards that appeared. I'll show you them in the full lineup. Take a look. Isn't this a riot? I think this is just the best thing in the world. What did we see? We saw that the valet de épée was looking at the world card. And the fool was marching off into the moon. And I'm going to just tell you right now before we get into this that I read the moon differently than many people. And so please stay open to my interpretation, because the moon card appeared for me in this spread because of the way I read it. That's why usually I tend not to read other people's cards for them, because okay, just a moment. When I say that, if somebody draws their own cards and then they put them up on, for example, Facebook or Instagram and say, what does this mean? I generally don't respond to those questions, because those cards did not appear for me in a reading. They didn't appear through me in a reading. Now, if I'm reading cards for somebody else, that's an entirely different matter. But if, for example, I were to pull my cards and upload them and say, what do you think my cards meant for me? That's an almost nonsensical question. What do my cards mean for you? That's a possible question, but my cards didn't appear for you, they appeared for me. Does that make sense? So, sure, sometimes adding your interpretation will help us grow in our understanding, but this card appeared in this reading because of the way that I see this card. If I saw this card in a different way, probably a different card would have appeared in that spot in this reading. So, let's get into it. So the page was looking off at the world completion, right? Unity. Now we got a figure dancing in the middle of a wreath with the 4 evangelists, the 4 winds, the 4 elements, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, whatever you want to call them, the 4 things in the corners. The valet was looking at that. And so the valet is open to understanding from. Now, okay, so the world card, unity, realization of potential, fullness. But there's always also sometimes the idea of the cosmic egg. And that cosmic egg also makes me think of the self archetype in the unconscious. Does that make sense to you? The self archetype is generally imagined as a sphere, a roundness, the unity of all that is in a fractal, in a holographic sense, in the unconscious. And so the valet here, I think, is looking at their own fullness of self with a big S, their own self, their own unconscious. Knower of all that there is. The warehouse, the storehouse of all of their own information. There in the self. And from that, we get something new is to be born, right? The world card is also a transition back into a new cycle. And it's in that moment of one thing ending and the next thing beginning that we get glimpses. In that liminal space, we get glimpses of our inner truth before we get wrapped up in the next thing. Now we've come through the conclusion of something and we haven't gotten wrapped up in the next thing, and then there's that liminal space, and in that liminal space we have more access to the fullness of who we are without distraction. And I think the valet is looking at that moment, at that liminal space, and able to receive information from that, from the unconscious, from the self, and also from the eternal nature that we are. Not being entirely sure about what to do with it yet, but receptive to that information. And we've got the Fool marching off into the moon. To the moon, Alice! But the Fool is going off into the moon, and the moon can be secrets, can be illusions, can be repression of all things. And I don't think this card in this spot is trying to remind us of, let's repress. Especially not when we're asking the question about what will opening to the receptive mind allow us to understand about living life intentionally. It's going to allow us to understand repression. I suppose that's one direction we could go. There's information in that direction, surely. However, the moon is also the unconscious for me. Deep subconscious, intuition, night, dreams. And from a Jungian perspective, dreams are informative. They're not distracting, they're not frightening, hopefully. I mean, our conscious mind can react with fear to some of our dreams. Yes, definitely. And that is something we want to probe. However, the dream itself is not a fearful thing. Our reaction to it can be fearful, but it is not in itself a fearful thing. We don't like what we see in ourselves, so we react with fear. But it's in there anyways. Whether we're afraid of it or not, it's in there. And so, what do we get? We get the Fool marching in to see what all is in there. In the unconscious, in our intuition, in our dreams, in the night of our deepest understanding. And a lot of people see the night as being the place of misunderstanding or illusions in the negative sense. Not visions of truth, but illusions of falsehood. And I don't see it that way. For me, the night is the truth of the dark. There's the truth of the bright light of the rational mind, yes, but there's also the truth of the dark, of the unconscious, which is where most of our information really lies. It's also a card for divination, imagination, hidden treasures, those things that we call shadows and we're often afraid of, and we say, I've got to do a spread, I've got to throw cards so that I can do my shadow work, because it's hard stuff, it's hard, it's horrible, it's frightening stuff. We can turn that on its head and realize that doing this shadow work is more of going on a treasure hunt. There be treasure down there. And that's what this fool is marching off to. The fool is marching off to receive information from self, from the hidden treasure within, from their imagination, from their receptivity, from their dreams, from their intuition, from their unconscious and deep subconscious, which is where the self resides. Which is what also, I think, in this spread, the Valet de Épée is looking at. And in the center of all this, we have the fire of passion and creativity, which gives us the energy to be able to do all of that. So, what will opening up to the receptive mind allow us to understand about living life intentionally? That opening up to the receptive mind in this way is the intentional life. And it is fired, it's fueled by our passions, by our creativity, by the fire within. It takes fuel, it takes fire to be able to sustain this. Our receptivity requires energy because it's not a passive receptivity, it's an active receptivity when living the intentional life. Does that make sense? I hope it does. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments below. If it does, let me know in the comments below. Hit the like button because that helps the channel. It really does. Also, hit the alarm bell if you haven't, and subscribe to the channel so you get information about when I upload videos. I've got a surprise coming up pretty soon in the next week or so. Also, share this around. Share links to this video on other platforms that for people that you think might be benefited from by looking or by watching this. I'm not speaking English very well anymore. And comment below. I would love to hear from you. I always love to hear from you. And friends, there will also be a link below to my Instagram account. If you want to get a personal reading from me, go over there. Now, hop over to my Instagram account and send me a direct message saying, I want a reading, and we can work it out. Okay? And so, friends, now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.